to the origins of life here on Earth. Needless to say, this is precious cargo, and the recovery team is fully aware of the gravity of the situation and the importance of what they're about to do today with these recovery operations. You can see it looks like our parachute has come to a stable rest. The winds were pretty low today, so it looks like it is not billowing at all. It is almost perfectly flat, at least from this perspective, on that desert terrain. And throughout all these operations, the crew member's safety is paramount. So you'll see the team probably huddle up a couple times as they begin these recovery operations to make sure that everything is safe and continues to be nominal as they make their initial safety sweep. All of this recovery should be a very quick process, usually. They've rehearsed for this again for months. They've been out here all summer really rehearsing for this moment. They did a drop test last month. They've also had numerous rehearsals actually practicing containing that SRC, getting it on a sample carrying fixture.
Recovery operations, WV has located the parachute on the ground.
You just heard that confirmation from that high altitude plane locating that parachute on the ground. This location info will be relayed to our team members aboard those helicopters as they begin their approach out to the landing zone. We do have that confirmation from the high altitude plane, as you just heard. We're still working to get confirmation from our NASA helicopter. It is on its way out to that landing zone as we speak, so we should hopefully have that view up in just a few moments. You continue to see our team just next door, the mission operations team, all looking at that high altitude view. Right in the middle there, just pointing around with the UV white shirt, is Rich Witherspoon from Lockheed Martin. He has been leading a lot of these operations for the past couple months. He's been preparing the team for this exact moment and really has been a great leader helping us get ready for these recovery operations. Yeah, so this ellipse here, this landing zone, is a quite large setup here, and this was chosen intentionally for this mission. It's about 37 miles by 9 miles total, this landing ellipse, out in the Utah Test and Training Range here in Dugway, Utah. This is an enormous facility. As you heard earlier, it's about the size of Rhode Island, all in all, this whole facility. It's relatively flat, very smooth terrain, this desert surface. So it's perfect for bringing something back and having that nice, safe landing on the desert surface. Just a few years ago, the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft back in 2020 made its tag attempt, the touch and go attempt to actually collect the sample that has now landed in this desert. When it did that, it was only at the surface for just a couple seconds, descending at a speed about 11 centimeters per second, just a little bit faster than a baby that is crawling. It's a very slow pace, but they were able to successfully get that sample and bring it from the edge of our solar system back to us here at that Utah Test and Training Range. You can see our full screen view here of that high altitude view, looking at the parachute at rest on the surface of the desert. This is at the Utah Test and Training Range. It's a wide open expanse here, and the team has this positional info, and they'll be relaying that to our helicopter teams to begin those recovery operations. And what you'll see in a couple seconds here, the recovery team, the recovery crews are responsible for securing the sample return capsule, the landing site around it, and helicoptering the SRC to a portable clean room that's located just next door here on the range. And just a little bit later on, it's going to be attached to a 100-foot long line beneath one of the helicopters, and then will actually be flown to the clean room. This was determined to be the best possible way to transport that SRC safely and efficiently, to get it on a nitrogen purge and maintain that pristine nature of the sample within. As I mentioned, this is an enormous ellipse, 37 by 9 miles. It's a large expanse to cover by car. It's a very bumpy ride out there as you kind of start to make your approach across this rugged terrain. With the helicopters, it will be approximately a 20-minute flight back with that SRC. They take it at a nice slow pace, effectively parading the SRC around, just giving it its last big moment as it is served its purpose officially at this point of getting that sample canister safely here to Earth. Once we actually land and begin those recovery operations, you'll see a lot of team members out beginning to take samples, both air and also soil samples from around the area. These are places of interest for the sample curation team that will actually open up the sample canister in the coming days down at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. They have a phenomenal sample curation facility there, and these samples from Asteroid Bennu will join a historic collection of other asteroid materials, including samples from the Apollo mission, samples from both the Stardust and Genesis missions, as well as Antarctic meteorites that were collected by our scientists. In the coming days, we'll actually know exactly how much sample we got back from Bennu. The original mission requirement was 60 grams of pristine sample from the asteroid surface. Based on some very clever engineering, the team believes that they have potentially 250 grams, or 6 times that mission requirement, inside. And so we just heard that unofficial touchdown time was at 8:52 a.m. Mountain Time here at the Utah Test and Training Range in Dugway, Utah. If you're just joining us, you see that view right now from one of our high-altitude planes observing our touchdown location. On your screen just above that crosshair is the orange creamsicle-colored parachute that brought us the last part of our journey down to the surface of the Earth. You heard from Jim earlier that main parachute is about 24 feet across. Fairly large parachute that helped us decelerate on our last leg of the journey. And so we just heard a confirmation actually that the main parachute deployed much higher than was originally anticipated. It was originally supposed to deploy at about 5,000 feet elevation, but it actually deployed at around 20,000 feet, so much higher up. So that would explain our kind of earlier touchdown time than expected here. It still has touchdown on the Utah Test and Training Range. Team members continue to fly out to this location aboard helicopters. As I mentioned, there are 4 recovery helicopters in total. The mission operations team is continuing to monitor the situation. They're the ones who are relaying us that info about that high parachute deployment, that 20,000 foot parachute deployment. They're going to be assessing the situation from their end here, relaying any possible info over to our recovery teams as they begin to make their trip out to our SRC. One of the first goals once the team gets out there is to safe and stow the parachute. Begin to mark places of interest, as I mentioned, for that curation team to begin sampling. This is all a very well-coordinated machine, very well-oiled machine that operates in tandem. They've rehearsed extensively for this moment. So we just heard from the team in that mission operations room that they have visual of the parachute, that orange parachute that you saw on your screen moments ago, but we do not yet have visual confirmation of the SRC itself. The team is continuing to survey the region, looking for that sample return capsule.
Recovery operations. Kilos 1 and 2 are in the area of the landing site, and they're in a search operation.
So you just heard that call out from Tim Preiser, who you see on your screen there from the mission operations room. He just announced that Helos 1 and 2 are now at that landing site. They're pointing out something on the screen. I see some smiles. It seems like we might have potentially some more information on that SRC in the coming moments. Helos 1 and 2 will be surveying this region, looking for both that SRC and also eyeing up the region, looking at that parachute that was deployed.
Recovery operations. All of the ground supporting vehicles have left wood and are in pursuit of the landing zone.
So some more team members are going to be heading out to that landing zone as well in support of those 4 helicopters that will be the main group recovering that sample. The main helicopter will be actually attaching that sample return capsule once the team has it located and ready to prepare for recovery operations. They'll load that on long line. You can see once again, some team members pointing at items on the screen here. We'll hopefully get confirmation in the coming minutes of that SRC location. Tim Prizer pointing at the screen now, wondering if he has any more information for us on where that sample return capsule location would be. We do have visual confirmation of that parachute, as I mentioned. Rich Witherspoon radioing out to the team, and now we have a view from our helicopter of the landing location. You can see the sample return capsule dead center on your screen, that kind of dark gray black object right there. And then just to the right of it, a little bit below, is our parachute. It appears to be resting on the surface. We're getting a zoom in now from our NASA helicopter, and you can see now the SRC. At last, we have a visual of it on the surface of the Utah Test and Training Range. I'm sure that is a pleasant sight for the team to see.
Recovery operations. Helo 2 has visual on the SRC. I repeat, SRC has been located.
And we have visual on that SRC. It appears that the parachute has also disconnected. It's a little bit off from that SRC, disconnecting from the back shell. The SRC appears to be resting on its nose, that heat shield that protected it the whole way down through that entry, descent, and landing. Lockheed is celebrating that moment. I'm sure they are breathing another sigh of relief here. It's been a wild morning for everyone involved. They've been up since the crack of dawn, just a little bit further north from us in Waterton, Colorado. They gave the go command to actually release that SRC that you see on your screen right there from the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft about 4 hours ago. It then ventured entirely on its own and now sits on its own for us here in the Utah Test and Training Range. So now that we have visual, the teams should be able to begin the recovery operations in just a few moments. As I mentioned, that first person on scene will be the on-scene commander, Stu Wiley. He'll be doing an environmental sweep. We're getting a nice close-up view. You can see the parachute. The SRC looks quite charred up from that entry in. That was expected as we heated up to temperatures over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit upon entry into Earth's atmosphere. You can see a great visual of some of that rugged terrain out there. Just a sweeping expanse, very panoramic terrain at the Utah Test and Training Range. It's a great location for us to land this sample. The team looking a lot more relieved now that we actually have visual. And we should be able to begin those recovery operations shortly. Inside that sample return capsule are pieces of the asteroid Bennu. We'll be getting access to those samples in just a few days and actually seeing exactly what we got from the asteroid regolith. This mission continues to amaze me and everyone involved here. The engineering is ingenious for this mission, getting us with a robotic explorer to the edge of the solar system, collecting that sample, safely stowing it, and then actually transporting it back here to Earth for us to open up and analyze. The surface today was probably a little bit soft, so it looks like it's resting a little bit far off the actual desert. It doesn't appear to have dug in too much with that nose cone from the heat shield. You are here with us as we witness this historic moment. It's the first time the United States has delivered samples from an asteroid to Earth. And these samples will be analyzed for decades to come in laboratories around the world. And there is landing of our first helicopter at the site. Appears to have a nice soft landing. We're just probably a couple hundred feet.
Recovery operations. Helo 1 has landed at the recovery site.
So our first helicopter, you just heard confirmation, and you can see visual confirmation of that landing. We're maybe about 100, 200 feet away, landing away from that sample. So a little bit of a hike for our team members to get out to that sample return capsule and begin our environmental safety sweep. As I mentioned, our on-scene commander, Stu Wiley, will be the first person of the team to actually approach this sample, check the area for any unexploded ordnances, UXOs, that could possibly be out there on the range, and then also make sure that that SRC is safe for our operations team to approach and begin recovery. You can see where that parachute disconnected from the top of that SRC. That is the back shield that you see right there at the very top, with that little bit of white wiring still coming out of the top. Our SRC perfectly landed there on the Utah Test and Training Range. So what you're about to see happening next is the process of recovery operations. This is a key moment of today's events to actually get that SRC from out in the desert into our portable clean room here at Dugway. It is crucial that we maintain the pristine nature of this sample that we got back from Asteroid Bennu. It could hold the clues to how everything around us came to be, from the formation of the planets to origins of life here, so the team understands just how crucial the contents of that SRC is, and they're going to work as efficiently and as safely as possible to get that SRC contained, wrapped up in thermal blanketing, placed in a sample carrying fixture, and then attached with long line to our first helicopter there. It'll then be transported the long journey back here, a much more relaxing flight, I'm sure, for our SRC, to our portable clean room at Dugway. At which point the team members will extract the back shell and remove the heat shield from the SRC. It's served its purpose. We're mainly now concerned with getting the contents within that sample canister containing pieces of the asteroid regolith out of that SRC. We won't actually, as I mentioned, be opening that sample canister just yet here at Dugway. The team is simply focused on getting that SRC, or the sample canister rather, on a nitrogen purge, and this is to maintain that pristine nature and prevent any kind of contaminants from the atmosphere from getting into our sample within.
Recovery operations. Helos 3 and 4 have been cleared to land at the recovery site.
And the rest of the team is closely behind, ready to land at the recovery site to begin operations. This will be simultaneous action that you'll see here once we have the clearance from Stu Wiley to begin our recovery operations. At least from this perspective, I'm not noticing really any drag marks or any kind of roll marks, but the team, once they approach, will mark any possible areas of interest where the SRC possibly came in contact with the rough desert terrain. All of these regions will be sampled by our recovery team and will be passed off to the sample curation team at the Johnson Space Center. As they begin to unload and actually open up the sample canister there, exploring the contents